All right. We got 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Oh, still waiting. How's everyone doing? Steven in the golf.
I'm merged up today.
Merged out
Yeah.
golfware.
Yeah.
Mina, what drink is that?
Green tea.
Oh, it looks delicious. Does it have some lemonade in it?
Yeah.
Oh, with a splash of sweetener?
Yeah.
Oh, now it's just funny, like people drink like iced coffee in the summer to like cool off. That just never cools me off, but that is amazing. Good choice, excellent choice, very refreshing. How's life otherwise? How are things with people?
How was Halloween?
Sorry?
How was Halloween?
Oh yeah, the deal. Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yesterday was I've lived through several decades worth of Halloweens, but yesterday was the first Halloween where I dressed up as a strawberry, because that's my daughter's favorite fruit. So my wife and my daughter and I were all dressed as strawberries. And she's too young to trick or treat, eat candy, and so we just walked with her so she could see people and be scared by them, I suppose, but she wasn't. She's okay. So it was good. How was yours? Did anybody dress up?
I was working on Halloween. I don't know.
No, that's really horrifying.
Yeah, I work at Busch Gardens too.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah. I'm just trying to like get a box from one gift shop to the other, and there's like guys dressed up as like axe murderers. I'm like, hey, what's up?
It'd be the perfect night for an axe murderer to just like, for an actual axe murderer. No one would know how to find them. Everyone would be dressed like an axe murderer. Let's see, we got 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. All right, we have quorum. Let's get started. All right, welcome back to another episode of Comparative Political Theory. Today, we're going to talk about Emerson and his essay on self-reliance, which I'm interested to know what you guys thought of, for those of you who read it. But before we get to that, I have a couple of bureaucratic announcements. The first of which is kind of, I'm going to kick myself if I was flexible enough in my head for what I'm about to do. But I've not yet started grading your papers. I've started grading my papers for the other class, which stupidly I asked for them to be due like 2 days before yours were. So in the order of priority, their pile was there first. So I've started going through that. And then I'm going to get to yours. Here's what I'm offering this time that I did not offer last time, though I should have offered it last time given the amount of work that I have this time makes it insane that I'm doing it this time, but it needs to be done. So when I was a fresh college professor at USF, inspired, idealistic, hopeful, I would collect papers from people at the end, for every exam. I would take those papers home, literally printed out papers, and I would take out my pen, not a red pen, because that's just assuming too much authority. With my blue pen, I would write copious comments on the margins of the papers, make suggestions, have conversations, and write a huge paragraph at the end, summing up my thoughts on the paper, what the main points were that I thought were important, what the strengths were, what the takeaway were, but also areas of improvement, and I would give a grade at the end. And you can imagine grading each paper like that was just taking about an hour and 15 minutes to grade each paper. So you can imagine 42 people in a classroom, you can add up the number of minutes involved there. And then I discovered, much to my dismay, this is about 2 years ago, that most of my students, nothing new, probably everyone in this room would not do this, but most of my students were not actually reading my comments. Like they would go to the last page, they look at the grade, or even better, they would just look at Canvas what the grade was and then move on. If they were unhappy with their grade, they would come and talk to me. But for the most part, they never looked at my comments. And so I instituted, that was horrifying. Can you imagine spending that much time on each paper and people not looking at your comments? It's just heartbreaking. So I created a new strategy. The strategy was I would ask people who wanted comments to physically bring their paper to class. Everybody else uploaded it. Everybody was supposed to upload it, but those who wanted comments would actually bring the paper with them to class. And you can imagine only those people who were very, very motivated to get comments were the ones who would actually bring it. And that was a fairly helpful way of sifting out those people who wanted my comments from those who didn't really care for it. And I understand. There's no judgment involved in this. It makes my life a lot easier, not having to give comments to everybody on every paper. But with COVID, I think I last time around, I have to admit, I kind of cheated my way out, right? Because there were not enough people in class. I was like, it doesn't make sense for me to ask people for their papers. I'm not going to ask anybody for their papers. The problem is there are probably people online, and there are probably people in this classroom who would have liked my comments, who would have benefited from them. So here's what I'm going to offer you. If you want me to give you comments on your paper, then on Wednesday, not today, on Wednesday, I want you to send me an email telling me you want comments on your papers. Those people who send me an email on Wednesday, I will respond to your papers with comments. My grading will not be in any way changed by the fact that I gave you comments or I did not give you comments. I will not think worse of you. I will not think better of you. It's just the service that I'm providing, but I want to make sure that I'm providing the service to those who actually want it, as opposed to everybody who they want to avail of it. And certainly, if you're the kind of person who's like, hey man, it's free, I'm not gonna look at his comments, I just want to get it because hey, I'm paying fees here. You have every right to do so, but I would ask that if you're going to get my comments, at least you do me the courtesy of looking at them and trying to respond to them in some way in your subsequent papers. Any questions about that? Okay, second bureaucratic point, and Shomik, can you remind me on Wednesday to mention this in the other class, because I meant to do it today and I forgot it. Second bureaucratic point, on your syllabi, you will see that on November 10th, I believe, there is no class. The instructor is away for a conference. Let me confirm. I think I said the 10th. I'm not sure. Let me just confirm.
Pretty sure.
Yes, November 10th. November 10th. There is class. I declined to go to that conference. I didn't want to get on a plane and don't pay money for a hotel to go to the conference. So we will have class on that day, and we will sift around the remaining readings in such a way that we have readings for that day. Did anybody make plans for November 10th? They're like, oh, there's not going to be class that day. Maybe cruise to the Bahamas, very close by. All right, so we will have class on November 10th, and we will adjust the readings for it accordingly. We might move the readings up a little bit. Any questions at all about anything on this one? No? Okay, all right, so let's get started. So this is what I want to do. First of all, I did not do a good enough job, nowhere near a good enough job, of talking to you about neoliberalism last time. I got stuck in an example, and we went on a cruise ship from there. I want to spend a little time today talking about neoliberalism. And here's what I want to do. Let me share with you the map that I have in my mind. We're reading Emerson because Gandhi, who we are reading next week, read Emerson. Emerson's essay, Self-Reliance, roughly can be translated into the title of the book, Self-Rule, Indian Self-Rule, or Hind Swaraj, that Gandhi wrote. So those things are proximate to each other. But the idea of self-reliance has in some way, not the Emersonian idea, but the concept of self-reliance has mutated over time into something that approximates a libertarian credo, where the Elon Musks of the world, or if you're interested in novels, the Ayn Rand variety of libertarianism is the sort of captures considerable amount of the airwaves in terms of how we're asked to conduct ourselves. Self-reliance is the philosophy of the age, if you will, but not the Emersonian. So I want to connect that self-reliance, the way it has mutated over time, to neoliberalism, which was one of the themes in Mohanty's book. So if I was to sort of draw a map for you, it would be from Mohanty. She talks about neoliberalism to neoliberalism as a creed, neoliberalism as a creed of self-reliance, to Emersonian self-reliance to Gandhi. You don't have to write this down. It's just the map. Well, you can't write this down. This is the map that we're trying to construct. So we're moving over a lot of terrain right now, but this is the pathway we're following. Right? So my aim is to show you that this thing and these things are very different from this thing. And if we are to appreciate this thing, we must in some ways let go of the ways in which self-reliance, independence, libertarianism have become normal things for us. And I'm going to show you why in a moment. And over the course of reading Gandhi, I'll tell you this from my past experiences of teaching Gandhi, we will find things in Gandhi that we like. There's lots and lots to like there. But one of the things I'm going to challenge you to do is I'm going to challenge you to think about Gandhi's philosophy not simply as a philosophical or theoretical sort of edifice, but to think of it as a way of life. And I think Emerson will take us some of the way towards that. So that's the purpose of Emerson today. Now, quick question. How many of you had read this essay by Emerson before? 2 people had. How many people read it for today? 1 person did. 1.5. Oh, that's going to be fun. Caesar did. Caesar, is that a question? Wait, hold on. I won't be able to hear you if you speak. Hold on. Caesar was, because the 2 people have. Okay. So, yeah, I think. Sama, would you say it was a interesting piece?
Luckily, I had a hard time with it.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I think I'd probably have to reread it.
Why did you have a hard time with it?
I wasn't used to a lot of the concepts. I probably only read like halfway through it.
Okay.
But I tried. So
You tried. No, yeah, that's more than I can say for. Well, more than what most people can say for themselves in this class. Kirstana, did you try?
I tried. I'm on the same boat as Sama.
Sorry?
I'm on the same boat as Sama too.
Uh-huh. All right. Well. Okay. All right. Let's see. Well, this is going to be fun then, because what does any of this stuff mean then? We don't know. Okay. Let's work our way there. Let's work our way through the text. It is a difficult text. It is a difficult text because it requires you to slow down. It demands that you slow down. It's not going to give you everything. It's not going to be completely self-evident to you. Like there are parts of it that I don't understand. I'm like, I don't know. He's responding to particular people or particular controversies in his own time that are meaningless to us today. So there are parts of it that nobody will understand. But I will ask you to slow down when you read it. And I would insist that you read this. And I would insist that you read the essay that I'm going to post today, which is for Wednesday, if we don't finish this today, which is the essay on civil disobedience. Has anyone read that before? By Henry David Thoreau. 3 people have. And I imagine a couple there probably online. So you must read that. I can tell you this, Emerson and Thoreau, amongst a few other people, are America's gift to world civilization. I think you should go through college, you should get a chance to read these guys. They're fantastic. Even if only you read one of them, you should read at least something by them. It's Mercedes.
Is the Thoreau's civil disobedience going to be put on the files, or do we just have to?
Yes. No, I'll put it on the file. I mean, you can find it online, but the text is free at this point. It's public domain. But I will upload a copy of it. Okay, all right. Now we're going to start again. We're going to start very far from Emerson. We're going to start in some universe of neoliberalism. So, neoliberalism is a way of thinking about the world on the principles of the market. To convert things that do not belong to the market, to submit them to the logic of the market, is one of the things that neoliberalism does. Neoliberalism says you must see yourself not as an individual with depth or feelings or whatever. I mean, you can, but effectively, your life should be governed by the same principles that govern a firm. how are you going to invest in yourself? How are you going to see yourself grow? How are you going to make yourself into something better? Because if you do not do those things, the world, which is being more and more organized along the principles of neoliberalism, which is more and more being organized, in other words, on the principle of the firm, will leave you behind. I gave the example last time of, your dating profiles, for instance. The dating profile, the dating world, for instance, is one example where the principles of neoliberalism dictate whether you'll be able to find a partner in life or not. You must invest in your personal appearance. You must invest in how you appear, not just in your personal appearance in terms of how your teeth are or how your hair is cut or whatever, but also in how you appear to other people, the way you carry yourself, if you are to compete in the marketplace, really, of other competitors who also are trying to match up with somebody else. But that might be a trivial example, although I think it's a very deep one that affects people's lives on a very regular basis. But for ourselves, here, one of the chapters in Mohanty's book is about the university system, how educational systems are being bent to a neoliberal logic. If I was, for example, here's an example. I was telling my class this morning that I used to be I still am, again, on the College of Arts and Sciences Library Committee. So our job, a bunch of professors from the College of Arts and Sciences, someone from the physics department, someone from the English department, someone from communications, someone from SIGS. And our job, as a grad student, as an undergrad, our job is to advise the library on how to meet the needs of faculty members and students. So the last time I was on this committee, I was like, hey, I think we should be buying some more books, because the last time I checked, there were 500 books that I needed, and you only had 2 of them. And I was told, that we would love to do that. The librarians would love nothing more than to have more books put in the library. The trouble is, they don't have any money. They don't have any money because they've not been given any money. They've not been given any money by the university administration because the university administration does not have money. The university administration does not have money because the university administration gets its money allotted to it from Tallahassee, which has decided to tighten belts all around the university system. The Tallahassee worldview, the reigning worldview is that we must practice austerity. We cannot let wasteful public institutions like libraries and universities take away and misspend the public dollar. We must, as we don't have a state income tax anyway, we must limit the amount of sales tax. We must allow for tourism. We must allow for more private investment. We must have, the Ronald Reagan Turnpike. 275 should become a turnpike. 75 should become a turnpike. I-4 should become a turnpike. Such that the state involvement in public institutions comes down to an absolute zero. What that means is that effectively you and I are then forced to fall back on our own private resources to gain access to stuff, or put tremendous pressure on those cash-strapped public institutions to provide us with the same services as before. At the recent CAS Library Committee meeting, the dean of the library system said that there is something called interlibrary loan. Does anyone know what that is? Interlibrary loan basically means if our library doesn't have a book, then we can get that book from some other library in some other part of the country. It's a wonderful system. Most universities have it. The dean of our library system told us that by his last count, UF has 31 people working in the interlibrary loan division of the UF libraries. Libraries. How many libraries do we have? Yeah.
2.
We have 2?
Yeah, there's one for the medical science, but only like medical.
Oh my goodness.
And aren't there libraries at St. Pete and Sarasota?
Oh yeah, the other schools. We don't care about
They
them.
have one.
3 campuses, 1 university.
Yes. The St. Pete Library is pretty nice. Good, don't go there. I used to go and work there because there would be nobody around. So as opposed to at UF, there are like 12, 13 libraries. So across those 12, 13 libraries, they have 34 people working on the interlibrary loan system, which is insane. We have 3. We have 3 because we don't have the cash for it. We don't have the cash for it because the university system has not given us the cash for it. The university system doesn't have the cash for it because Tallahassee hasn't given the cash for it. And the Tallahassee will not give us the cash for it because Tallahassee believes that the principle of market competition should be the overriding framework within which all public institutions should operate. John?
So in this instance, would sort of the market value reason why UF has more resources would be because they have maybe a stronger football program that brings in larger scale donors that can maybe fill in the gaps where Tallahassee isn't filling them in those spaces like the library system?
That is possible, although interestingly enough, so the neoliberal fantasy is that the state should withdraw. But what the state ends up doing is it ends up sort of negotiating with private interests in ways that are conducive to private interest. So it's also possible that, alumni from UF and FSU have the ear of people at Tallahassee much more intensely than we do. But yes, the logic principle would be that the football team, the Gators bring in way more money even when they lose to Georgia. Which apparently they did. I think they did. Valley says, lol, we don't have money for it, but US have $1.2 billion, roughly 1/4 of the university's whole net worth just in investments. The interesting thing about, so Harvard, for instance, has like billions of dollars in its endowment, but it can't actually invest its money in its own university. Harvard has become effectively a hedge fund with an educational side gig. But anyway, the neoliberal rationality is that thing is rational, which helps reorganize the world on the basis of a market. The other example that I can give you is the example of debt. We know, as a feature of common sense, that going into debt is bad. We shouldn't go into debt. We shouldn't go into long-term debt that we can't repay. And that's sort of the worry about going into unrecoupable debt is one of the bases on which the federal policy regarding expenditures on social services is based. Recently, if you may be following the news, President Biden's unexpectedly very progressive agenda involves spending how many trillions of dollars? $3 trillion?
It was like 3 trillion and now it's like $1 trillion.
It was 3.5, and then some people wanted all the way up to 6, and then it's been cut to about 1.75.
Right.
So that Cinema actually votes on it.
Right. So wait. From 3, somebody wanted it to go to
It started like.
6, and then now it's actually 1.5.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a huge drop of $4.5 trillion. So I don't know if you heard this few months ago, Democrats were talking about how everything is infrastructure. Right? Libraries are infrastructure. Infrastructure is infrastructure. Childcare is infrastructure. What they were trying to say is that a society runs, the care work that we talked about, for instance, runs through the interventions, often unpaid interventions, of thousands of people of doing hundreds and thousands of hours of unpaid work. And then if you were to actually incentivize these things by spending money on them through government programs, we would actually put them on a more secure basis. So, for example, we know that early childhood experiences in the pre-K range are perhaps the most important experiences you will have in terms of determining your overall well-being over the course of your life than any other experience in your life that you have later on. If for those first few years you have a good childhood, where you get good food, good shelter, good education, your chances of doing well in life are much greater than if you are lacking those in those first few years, even if later on you might get some. So with that in mind, the Biden administration recommended all sorts of things to have, like have paid family leave and have pre-K schooling and childcare benefits, etc. The Republicans will never vote for this. Not a single Republican in the Senate will vote for this because I think they're voting along party lines. But even amongst the Democrats, 2 people, I think somebody mentioned Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, have been making sounds. And Joe Manchin particularly says he doesn't want to create an entitlement society. And what he means by that is he doesn't want to make people dependent on the state and expect from the state as if they're entitled to benefits from the state, benefits that the state can provide. Now, the argument there is a neoliberal argument at its very core, because what has happened in that argument is that Joe Manchin would, at other moments, for example, say that he cares about family values. We shouldn't go into debt, because if we go into debt, we mortgage our future. Our future generations will be paying the debt that we take on today. But, ironically, the weapon by which he will prevent us from going into debt in the future in order to protect those future generations, the weapon of austerity, becomes parasitic on those very future generations, because parents today, or would-be parents today, are unlikely to have children because of the tremendous costs of having children and the lack of support when they're trying to have children. So the very future generations that Joe Manchin would want to protect by introducing the principle of neoliberal austerity today will prevent those very future generations from being born in the future. So in this way, neoliberal rationality is this worldview where the instrument of rationality, of rationally organizing your life according to the principles of the market, becomes parasitic on the very values that those things are supposed to defend. Does that make sense? So, we live in a largely neoliberal age. You just open the newspaper and you'll find it. There was this brief moment of euphoria on the left, I imagine, when the $6 trillion infrastructure plan was being supported. People were like, I never would have thought that Joe Biden would be the candidate of my dreams. I always wanted Bernie, but yay for Joe Biden. But the reality is, this is where it'll end up, which is a drop in the bucket. Right? Similarly, the principle of the market will mortgage the environment. Climate change will not be fought with a $1.5 trillion bill. Cap and trade, which is, totally pointless exercise as far as climate change, fighting climate change is concerned, will be the order of the day. Let the market figure out how to charge for pollution. Let the market figure out how much how much consumers will bear. If, driving cars is bad for the environment, then, have a tax that the people will be willing to pay. And if they're not willing to pay, they'll stop driving. Fact of the matter is, by the time the market responds to that reality, climate change, which is already baked in, will be, pardon the pun, baked in even further. Yes?
Yeah, sort of on that climate change point.
Yeah.
I was listening to a piece about sort of how this bill got whittled down and how Joe Manchin was at the center of it.
Yeah.
And how he actually has a vested interest in aspects of the climate change policy not going into effect, where within this bill, he was anti stipends that would be used for transitioning away coal and oil plants towards wind and solar,
Right.
because he is a major shareholder in his family's, that's now run by his son's oil or coal company, and how that was an effective conflict of interests when examining, actual effective climate change if you're profiting off of fossil fuels.
I did not know that. That's insane. All right, well, moving on. But the idea of neoliberalism is that the world ought to be reorganized according to the profit-loss motive that guides firms. If we do that, the defenders of neoliberalism argue, we will end up with much better, more efficient results, a better, more efficient sense of well-being that's shared by a larger number of people than if some central authority tried to figure out from above what policies to implement. Sure. And Matthew says a lot of neoliberal arguments possess a lot of false dichotomies that do not make sense. Either on the one hand, you can be owned by Enron, or you can live in the Soviet Union. Matthew, if you were in class, if you want to speak a little bit more to that, we can, but I want to move on from that point. The basic idea that I want to move on to, this is the kind of the segue towards Emerson, is this idea of disenchantment, which is, has anyone heard of Max Weber? Okay, Max Weber is considered, is considered the father of sociology. And Max Weber makes this argument that across time, the nature of authority, of why we should believe in the claims that authority makes for itself, the nature of those claims has changed. Back in the day, a lot of the claims that were made for authority were based on the principle of faith, belief. For example, does anybody in this room or online, does anybody look at their horoscopes?
As a joke, sometimes.
As a joke sometimes. Brooke does. Brooke, do you want to say something about it? Or other people do as well? Brooke, Monica, does anyone look at it seriously? Well, Brooke, you look at it. Can you please tell us? Would you want to join? If you have a moment, would you want to tell us what does that mean for you?
For me, it's like like how I'm feeling that day, or maybe like some stuff I should look for during the day to aid me throughout the day or the week or the month or the year.
Okay, and how do horoscopes work? What are they? When you read an average horoscope, what does it say?
So it's based off like the constellations within the star and the planets and stuff like that. And it usually tells me, you know, to like say if Mercury's in retrograde, you're not supposed to make big financial decisions and stuff like that, or not to make any big harsh decisions when this is in fruition.
Okay, so thank you so much, Brooke. So Brooke is effectively saying that what these horoscopes claim to do today is they tell you that the movement of the planets in relation to your position on the Earth or the time of the year that you were born in, so you were, you know, an Aries or a Taurus or a Gemini or a Cancer or a Leo or a Virgo or a Libra or a Scorpio or a Sagittarian, Capricornian, Aquarian, or Piscean. Wow, I know. Depending on which of these you are, and depending on which planets are traveling through which part of the sky, which relates to which house in relationship to your horoscope, that will determine your reality. Now, John says he looks at it as a joke, but there are people around the world today, I would suggest to you, probably hundreds of millions of them, who don't look upon it as a joke, who look upon it very seriously. That is, Weber's point is that there was a time when a lot more people, most people, did that. Most people drew their authority from that kind of worldview. Now, the thing about that kind of worldview is that there is, if you want to use the word magic, there is magic infused through every pore of your reality. In fact, your reality is structured by forces that you cannot immediately perceive. We don't have, let's see, any Harry Potter? Oh yeah, yes, we have a few. Any Harry Potter lovers in this room?
J.K. Rowling's problematic.
I like Harry Potter.
Oh, unashamed. Unashamed. Harry Potter. Who else? We got two people. Oh, come on. There's more than 3 people who like Harry Potter. 4, 5, 6. There we go. And there's more than 6 people who like Harry Potter. I'm absolutely convinced of it. They're just either not listening to us, or they are too abashed because they think it's a trap. They think a trap is coming for them because I keep bashing something or the other. Really, only 8 people like Harry Potter? That's interesting. That's fascinating. Well, Harry Potter, like the whole premise of that is that we muggles, I mean, maybe you're seriously, secretly a wizard, or what are female wizards called in that?
Witches.
They are called witches? Okay, all right. So either you're a wizard or a witch. You might be, but you're surrounded in a world of muggles who don't know anything about the magic. But magic is everywhere. You just must have to look, right? That childlike beauty of the Harry Potter world, Weber said, would have at one point been the organizing principle for all claims to authority. You would believe authority because somebody claimed that their authority derived from their ability to surmise in some fashion the operations of the heavens, and from that their authority had derived. That, in time, gives way to a different kind of authority, which is what Weber calls charismatic authority. So if you think about, there's a book recently that came out, it's called Men on Horseback. And it sort of talks about how at the end of the 18th century, start of the 19th century, there was this common theme of heroic people on horseback who were transformative agents of history. People like George Washington, and Napoleon Bonaparte, and Toussaint Louverture, and who's the fourth one that I'm thinking of here? Never mind. Like these people on horseback were charismatic figures who could, through the force of their own personalities, herald the emergence of a new age, bring about a new age. So much so that we kind of forget this or not really learn about it as much in the US today, but there was a serious consideration by none other than, by Hamilton, to have George Washington declared king for life. Such was the charismatic power that was thought to emanate from Washington. Similarly with Napoleon. The philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, who was in Germany, it wasn't Germany then, it was a small principality of Germany in a city called the Jena, Jena, saw Napoleon on horseback and wrote, "I saw the spirit of history on a horseback today." That Napoleon was going to bring a democratic revolution that would sweep aside the old monarchies of the past. Max Weber says authority came to derive from that. Simón Bolívar was the other one, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask if it was Bolivar.
Bolivar, Washington, Toussaint Louverture, and Napoleon. These are the people that this book tracks. It's a wonderful book. If you get a chance to look at it, please do. So, but Max Weber says that that's where authority seems to come from, the charismatic appeal of people. But over time, he says, even that changes. And what we are left with is a highly rational world. A rational world where calculation, prediction, measurement give us much greater control over the world. We're no longer worried about, as Brooke tells us, about whether Mercury is retrograde, about whether we should make financial decisions, or Brooke, I don't know if you knew this, but you're not supposed to buy any technology either during a Mercury retrograde, if you believe in such things. Rather than waiting for for Mercury to turn direct or for Simón Bolívar to appear on horseback, rational calculation and control allows us to control our lives and make transformative changes. We, as a species, can now reach into the human genome and tweak it in just the right sort of way using CRISPR to, if we wanted to, and I can bet you within the next 20, 30 years, most likely we will, create super babies of some sort. It's already happened in China. Some dude went and did it. Everybody can do it. Nobody had pulled the trigger. Sorry?
That's not what happened.
What did he do?
He changed their genes because they were kids who was born to someone who had HIV, and everybody said that there was better ways to do it, and they're like, don't mess with the genome, and then he did it anyways.
So the point is, he crossed over the door. Sorry, John?
I'm saying it's still kind of a super baby if you can just cut out the HIV,
So he opened that door and he walked through it. Now, everybody knew that door existed. We've had the technology to open it and walk through it. This dude walked through it. So, but my point is, we have the ability to control nature in such a transformative way that we don't need those old forms of authority anymore. I mean, the other great sort of image that we had was our ability to go inside an atom and manipulate it in such a way so that we can unleash tremendous destructive power, that it can wipe out life, not just human life, life on Earth altogether. The power of that rationality is very seductive. It is so seductive, in fact, that it structures the very way in which we think and interact with the world. It does so in a piecemeal way, little by little. Such that by the time we're in its thrall, we don't even realize what has happened. Yes, John.
I feel like the best way to sort of describe that and experience we probably all share was the race to create a good college application in high school, where we're all effectively investing in our human capital, but we're not necessarily being present. We're just focusing on what's best for investment on that next step.
Sure. How many of you joined a club or did something in high school or you're in college? Anybody? Absolutely. Absolutely. How many of you are morally bankrupt as a result now? No, that's great, Stephen. Maybe Stephen owns up to it, right? That's what I meant by you have to. Thank you, John. You have to invest in yourself. You have to constantly be investing in yourself in a way that allows you to benefit from the structure in which you live. Because if you don't do it, you will be left behind. And the costs of being left behind are incredible. They're not easily surmounted later on in life. So I think we all understand the neoliberal world. Even if we can't break free from it, we can at least learn to recognize. But in this neoliberal world, there is a creed of self-reliance. And the creed of self-reliance is the kind of creed, for example, that Joe Manchin says. That he was one who created enlightenment. Well, that'd be nice. An entitlement society. And Joe Manchin says that when Republicans and Democrats on both sides of the aisle, including Joe Biden, when he was a senator, when people say that, they're all reading from the same script. And the same script is the neoliberal script. And that neoliberal script basically says, look, you're in it for yourself. Nobody's going to help you. You have to make something of yourself. You have to be something amazing, something fantastic. Otherwise, you'll be left behind. You must get the right education. You must have the right kind of appearance. You must have the right kind of investments. Otherwise, the world will leave you behind. And the fact of the matter is that if you don't do those things, the world will leave you behind. And you will find yourself in a very horrible position later on in life. I think one of the saddest things that I see that really sort of goes to the heart of my being, the part of me that, despite living here for the majority of my life, can never quite accept it, is when I see old people who have not been able to get enough Medicare or Medicaid or whatever, who work as Walmart greeters. Like this 80-year-old man working as a Walmart greeter, because that's the only way in which he can make ends meet. That's just heartbreaking. But from a neoliberal perspective, like, dude, you should have saved more money. Should have put money in a Roth IRA that have grown at a compound interest rate. And if you had, you would have been pretty well off. The fact that you didn't do it means that you made poor choices in your life, and therefore now you must suffer the consequences of it. You are responsible for your own place, is the neoliberal credo. Yes, Andrew.
For my job, I do a lot of work with freight and unloading stuff.
Yeah.
And there was this guy I worked with who retired recently who was 75 and he just came back from beating cancer. And then immediately after he did that, he went to basically unloading trucks for 12 hours a day. So that just kind of really messed with me for a while.
Right, and he probably did that because he went into tremendous medical debt to pay for his cancer medication. And, but while we can take pity on those situations, cases like that, and perhaps you can rely on personal charity and private charity of various sorts, the neoliberal creed would say it's not the business of the state to come and rescue you. Because, and someone actually says this, to tax people to pay for this person's well-being is effectively to steal from them and to convert them into slaves. Robert Nozick, for those of you who are interested, makes that argument. Mercedes and John.
So far by neoliberalism, you've defined the state by what it's not. So what is the state in neoliberalism defined as what it should be doing?
Andrew will talk.
Well, it's a lot of it is that at least in the neoliberal dogma is, like he said, is that the state should be reduced. He said the neoliberal fantasy, the state should be reduced to basically just being a non-actor. It's just all market institutions acting in a rational manner like firms do. But in a lot of ways, the state becomes more active because COVID-19 is a perfect example. There was huge amounts of the Federal Reserve, with tons of quantitative easing, just huge injections of cash into the economy to make sure that markets didn't go bust, bank runs didn't happen. So in many ways, the whole idea is the state doesn't get involved, but what the state does is essentially just prop the market up and prop up the financialization of a lot of formerly public institutions. Or at least that's how I think of it.
That's good. I want you to come to my other class and explain this to my colleagues in my other class. No, exactly. I think Andrew's exactly right. So the idea is that the state should step away. Step away and let the markets do things. Markets will do things much more efficiently than some bureaucrat in Washington or Tallahassee. And in many ways, that does happen. But what the market also wants is for the state to structure the playing field in such a way that the market is able to use resources without having to pay for them. So for example, the market relies on a body of educated, even if minimally educated people in order to perform the functions that the market needs to perform. But the people who pay for that education are the taxpayers who send their kids to public school. Without the state intervention and investment in public education, the market will not have, companies will not have workers who could do the jobs that need to be done. They want to make sure that there are rules in place that protect firms from the influence of unions. Union busting, for example, is something that the markets rely on quite a bit. Make sure that unions don't have the power to negotiate as equal partners with work. You have lots of so-called right-to-work states where you cannot automatically be forced to join a union, which means that unions don't have anywhere near the bargaining power that they need in order to be able to compete on a level playing field with large firms. John, then Mercedes.
I was just gonna ask, within the neoliberal framework, how come things like universal pre-K and community college aren't necessarily supported when they are now sort of just as necessary as a high school education was, 30 years ago, as this framework was initially developed, and the market needs these educated individuals to succeed, and yet we're reaching, I think we're moving towards that point where neoliberalism is going to collapse on itself because it doesn't have an educated enough workforce that can actually respond to these jobs that it's created.
Right. So that's the interesting. It's one of the interesting things is that there's not just one neoliberalism. Like, whose neoliberalism
That's
do you someone like Hayek, for instance, who's one of the founders of neoliberalism or one of the intellectual forebearers, makes the argument that in order for the free market to work, you need to have a healthcare system, like what's the word?
A single payer,
No.
or not single payer.
Oh God. Basically, the National Health Service in the UK, for example, or what you have in Canada. You need to have that as the background for people to have the ability to enter the market. But other people say, no, you can't do that. You can't open the market, healthcare market. You can't close out the healthcare market. Anyway, we're going too far down this road. If you want to learn more about it, please take my contemporary critical theory course. We're going to get there. We're interested in something else. We want to think about self-reliance, not in the way of like, you are 75 years old and you beat cancer, good for you, now go and start working because you have to be self-reliant. We're talking about self-reliance in a different way. And Emerson is talking about self-reliance in a way that is, I would suggest to you, far more radical than anything that neoliberalism may throw at you. Far more transformative than anything that neoliberalism can throw at you. And one of the things it's asking you to do is it's asking you to slow down. Well, that is actually a very hard thing to do, to just slow down. I read this for the first time about a decade ago, this essay, much to my dismay. I did not read it in college. Nobody had time to read it in college, and I wish they had. And this weekend when I started reading it again in anticipation of my lecture, I found myself in Sama's shoes and Kirtana's shoes. And I was like, what's going on? What am I reading? What is this guy on? Why can't he just say things like, self-reliance is 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, done? What is this like? But keep thy state, come not into their confusion. The power men possess to annoy me, I give them by a weak curiosity. No man can come near me but through my act. What we love that we have, but by desire we bereave ourselves of the love. Like, what are you saying? What are you saying, Ralph? And then I found this note that apparently I wrote as a lecture note 10 years ago when I was teaching this text. And I looked at it, and I was like, what? I wrote this? I don't remember any of this. Of course, I wrote it 10 years ago, so obviously I don't remember writing this note, but I don't even understand the mindset from which I wrote this. And I tried to think to myself of what has changed. What has changed between the fact that 10 years ago I read this thing and I wrote, I'm going to give this lecture today, or some version of it, but it's a brilliant lecture. I don't have a single lecture from me this semester that's anywhere like this lecture. I hope it is. But what's changed? Part of it is, this time I'm reading, self-reliance, and I have a 19-month-old basically demanding snacks or wanting to go out. So I'm like reading a line, like, okay. There's that happening. But there's something else happening. Something else happening in here that I think is true for all of you. In a way that it wasn't true for me 10 years ago and may not have been true for you 10 years ago. And that is this. There is a way in which thinking through technology has corrupted my brain. I want things like, give me point 1, give me point 2, give me point 3. My habit of reading, of sitting with my discomfort of not understanding has disappeared or has weakened considerably. And the fact of the matter is, as I was reading it, and I would get stuck with something and I couldn't figure out what he was saying, and if my daughter was quiet for a moment, I would start doing something or the other on my phone. And in that light, what Emerson is talking about is very interesting, because next week when we get to Gandhi, Gandhi will give you straight up an anti-technological creed. Look at Andrew. Look at Stephen. Look at Meena. These are people with their gizmos open before them. Gandhi is going to go so far as to say that even modern medicine is bad. Now, you can say, oh, come on, man, of course, life-saving drugs. Gandhi, are you against life-saving drugs? And Gandhi has the courage of his convictions to say, yes, I am. And we will never appreciate what he is saying and why he is saying it if we don't learn to sit with this material, to slow down and not think in purely technological terms, because as with neoliberal rationality, the problem with technology is that we think we're using it, but it starts using us. You become a data point for Google every time you use Google Maps. You become a data point, and much more intrusive than that, for Facebook every time you use Facebook. Probably just heard what I just said. Probably going to shaping up the next ad it's going to show me.
The metaverse.
The metaverse. Amazon. So what does self-reliance mean in an age, in an algorithmic age? What does it mean to think for yourself outside of technology? That question, I think, is urgently needed and urgently needs to be asked and answered. Even if we come to the conclusion that Gandhi is completely nutso, as we'll see next week, for saying modern medicine is evil, or railways are bad, or lawyers are the most horrific thing that's ever happened. Even if you're like, what are you talking about, Gandhi? We need to be able to sit with what he's saying. Mercedes.
As much as he says that he's against life-saving medicines, I feel like he often is trying to contradict himself. Because there's a time when his wife had a disease that was easily treatable, and he refused to treat it, and then she passed away because they didn't treat it. And then later he got the same affliction and he treated it with medicine. So,
Gandhi did?
Yeah.
Also, wasn't he a lawyer?
He was. No, absolutely. Like, oh, okay, all right, okay. I see what's happening. Okay. So this is cool. You, person A, have stated a principle. B, you, person, have not been able to live by said principle. Therefore, C, said principle must be flawed. I don't think that syllogism follows. I can say to you that we should never lie. I can tell you that I'll probably lie to my daughter today. She'll want to eat something, green. No, sorry, not want to eat something that's green, vegetables. And I will tell her, it's cheese. Have I therefore I have violated the principle we should never lie. Have I shown therefore that the principle we should never lie is not a principle we should follow? I don't think so. So I want to hold off on the personal elements of Gandhi. Gandhi himself may be a flawed person in terms of being able to carry forth the message. But the message we must at least first understand. And I'm not sure about the particulars of the story. You'll have to tell me more about it. I'm interested. I'm not denying what you're saying, Mercedes. I want to know more about
I
it.
don't know a lot of detail because my sister was looking it up because she was like reading feminist stuff and it was part of it and she was like reading that word and she just told me about it. She was angry about it. So I don't really know a lot of details. I just know the basics.
Please find out. I would want to know. I mean, that you, like your sister or you have, basically cast an aspersion upon Gandhi's character. And that would not be the first one, and there are plenty worse things he did. Kirtana knows a whole bunch of them. You can ask her about it afterwards. What, sorry?
Very interesting.
That's not the word I would have thought you would have used. I thought you would have said it was pretty disturbing.
That's what I said the first time.
Okay, all right, yeah, I heard you correctly. You checked yourself. All right. So there's plenty of stuff there, but the principle itself is interesting. What is the principle? Why is he against technology? So let's unpack this idea of self-reliance. What is going on here in the time of yoga? And the place that I want to start with is with the idea of traveling. Emerson says, and you will read this is beautifully written. He says, traveling is stupid. Shobik, I'm going to ask you to queue up that video in a moment, all right? Hold on. Just give me 1 second, guys. We got to make sure that we have our technology. See, technology. Here I am hating on technology, and here I am. You don't see it? Okay. No, one thing, guys. Let me just find it. If I find it on YouTube, I'll just put it.
Maybe you've always wanted to, now you're now.
Okay. Guys, online, folks, I'm going to post post a link to a SNL skit in a moment. And I'm going to mute myself. Please watch it. And I'm going to show it in class as well, so that people can watch it together here. And then we'll discuss it momentarily. So I'm posting it online, and I'm going to mute myself I'm muting myself, thank you. So that basically captures Emerson. There you have it. That's Emerson in a 4-minute clip starring Adam Sandler. We're done. Any questions? Traveling is a fool's paradise. Our first journeys discover to us the indifference of places. At home, I dream that at Naples, at Rome, I can be intoxicated with beauty and lose my sadness. I pack my trunk, embrace my friends, embark on the sea, and at last wake up in Naples. And there, beside me, is the stern fact, the sad self, unrelenting, identical that I fled from. I seek the Vatican and the palaces. I affect to be intoxicated with sights and suggestions, but I am not intoxicated. My giant goes with me wherever I go. Now, the Adam Sandler thing is comical, but it's saying the same thing. So there are ways in which we try to avoid living with the reality of who we are by trying to escape it. The traveling thing, literally, by going to Italy. I mean, and funnily enough, Emerson sort of references Italy, precisely Naples and Rome, and the Vatican. But sometimes even conceptual travel, traveling to other places, imagining other places, does for us the same work that this activity of traveling does. It makes us believe that by going somewhere else, we will be unburdened by the reality of who we are, having to face up to who we are as people. As Adam Sandler says, if you're sad in your home, getting on a plane and traveling to Italy, it's going to be the same sad you, just now in Italy. Well, the reason why I start with the idea of traveling, why traveling is bad, according to Emerson, is not because literally he thinks traveling is bad. It's because he's trying to block off for us the escape routes we take in order to avoid facing up to who we are. Now, why is it important to face up to who we are? I mean, not all of us are sad. Maybe we do get only 45 minutes of happiness per day. That's the baseline. Maybe. But what does he mean by facing up to who we are? The challenge of Emerson that I think is really powerful, which I think Gandhi takes up and tries to answer in his own way. The challenge is that how do you see yourself as a person? Do you see yourself as a person who lives by their own convictions? For the most part, I'll be like, no, man, I don't live by my own convictions. I'm a hypocrite. I lie, I cheat, I swindle other people, but myself in various ways. I don't live by the strength of I don't have the courage of my own convictions. But Emerson, maybe he won't say that. Maybe he'll say to Emerson that you live by your own convictions. You have the courage of your own convictions. When you set yourself a certain path, you follow that path. Emerson will then ask you, how did you come to acquire those convictions? And there, I suggest to you, the challenge of Emerson, the force of Emerson's question is, most of us did not acquire it on our own. Most of us took it on from others. And so the entire project of self-reliance never even gets off the ground because we never have the conviction to live by the courage of our own convictions, to even find out what they are. We are so troubled by the stillness required to be with ourselves that we would sooner escape to Rome and Italy or into Snapchat and Instagram or Twitter than to actually live with the present moment as it stands before us. The ideas we have are often not our own. We saw somebody say them in a very nice way and we just imitated it. We became that person entirely. He says on the very same page after the traveling paragraph, which you can find on your own in the reading I uploaded, he says, we imitate. And what is imitation but the traveling of the mind? most of our opinions are produced by the people we spend our time with. I can tell you, I mean, you know, my wife tells me this and she's absolutely right. I spend an inordinate amount of time every day on Twitter. You know, I mean, this is true for all of these social media things. You know, for every hour you spend on them, or every 100 tweets that I go through, maybe I'll find one tweet that is actually useful for me in some way. I tell my wife, like, I'm on Twitter because, you know, everybody I follow is, you know, is an academic, and that's true. And, you know, people are constantly posting articles and books, and I want to basically be, you know, up to date in terms of the research that's going on. Yes, sure. Vast majority of the time is some kind of joke, some kind of reference to something that is completely irrelevant, some movie review. But I'm stuck on it. I'm constantly scrolling through Twitter. If you were to change slowly but surely, without my actually noticing it all at once, the people that I follow on Twitter, and change their political leanings from the ones that they currently have to a set of people whose political leanings are the exact opposite, I'm almost sure that in about 6 months or so, my political views will change. That's how horrifying this thought is to me. The things that I'm absolutely convinced by, that are the very core of my being, are nothing more than my having adopted uncritically the viewpoints of the people around me. And even if I don't actually hold the views of the people I follow on Twitter hold, just the metaverse of things that we are all engaging in and referencing, by virtue of the fact that they are the same, means that my thoughts also travel the same channels and the same roads that everybody else's mind travels, such that we end up becoming, in some ways, imitations of each other. And so if you spend any amount of time on any kind of social media, I would suggest to you the same thing applies to you. Does anybody here spend time on social media? None of you do. Oh, tell me, what other social media are there that you guys spend time on? TikTok! Twitter.
Tumblr.
Is Tumblr still a thing?
Yes.
It's like somebody's spending time on Vine.
No, it's not.
Mine's like actually good.
Yeah, but actually, yeah.
I got
Well,
taken
no,
out.
TikTok was basically Vine. It's just gone. What else? Okay, for those of you who do this, it's a very. Any Instagrammers here?
Like, do we use it?
Do we use it?
I transitioned from Instagram more towards Twitter.
I hate Twitter, so I don't. Twitter feels like cancel culture. It's
I have
just
a
like
niche portion of Twitter that I stick to.
rampant.
I have like esport, like gig Twitter, like that's it. I'm like,
Twitter feels like a
all-
war with memes. I'm kind of
Yeah, there's a lot
afraid
of
of Twitter.
All content and all other social media is just screenshots and videos from Twitter, so keep it.
Oh, it's funny that you guys mentioned this. I don't know. I don't know how to. Well, maybe I can do it this way. Shomik, is there a way for me to put my phone underneath that thing and have it broadcast on the screen?
Yeah, you should share your Twitter account with us.
No, well, you can find me on Twitter. It's not a problem.
Give it a try.
Yeah.
See, let me look at, let's see his Twitter account.
I don't even know what this means, but I sent it to my friend. Let's see if we can get DocCam.
No shit.
We can power it up, I think. Ooh.
Yeah. I don't know why I never thought of that.
There we go.
There he is.
All right.
Other way. But I am free.
Emerson at Beach. I'm cringe, but I'm free. I saw it on Twitter yesterday. I thought it was hilarious. Okay, we need to get away from this. Okay. All right. Wait. No, wait, we have a problem.
Oh, whoops.
Yep, we got it. Did you mute? All right. Sorry guys for online. Did you guys, were you people online able to see what I posted?
You should have been able to.
Should have been able to, right? Can anybody confirm online? Yes, okay, perfect. Right, so you see memes like that. Pretty. I added the Emerson at Beach part. But the point is that algorithms in our age dictate for us so much of what we see. And I'm not talking about ads, I'm talking about like substantive ideas. And Emerson is saying, when you do that, when anytime you reach into your pocket to grab your phone and seek an escape from the weightiness of the present, you in effect are ceding control over your own thoughts, over your own principles to somebody else. You're letting somebody else determine for you what those ought to be. Because you've never even spent the time to figure out for yourself what yours are. Emerson is also against memory. And this is one of the great lines that he has that when he, you know the expression, the shot heard around the world? That expression? Anyone heard that? What is that expression referring to?
Lexington conquered.
You know who came up with that expression? I didn't. Emerson. Emerson had these really amazing phrases. And he said, this is the following one is one of them. Let me make sure I say it exactly right because it's so perfect that one should not. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. Consistency, he says, foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. So one of the ways in which Emerson is so challenging is that you can imagine the sequence of events and go something like this. You start to spend time with yourself. You come to hold your own principles. You go and tell your family that you want to live your life by these principles. And your family says to you, like hell you are, you're going to do what we're going to tell you to do. You have obligations. You can't just give them up. You can't suddenly become some new version of yourself that you want to be. Besides, you signed up for all of these things yesterday. You can't simply drop them and become this new person. And Emerson says, if you're going to be true to yourself, you have to. You have to constantly transform yourself. But this is the last thing I'll say to you because we're out of time, and we'll have to come back to it on Wednesday. It says, this one fact the world hates, that the soul becomes. Not that the soul is, the soul becomes. For that forever degrades the past, turns all riches to poverty, all reputation to a shame, confounds the saint with the rogue, shoves Jesus and Judas equally aside. I mean, I want you, if you can, please, people online and in front, read it, sit with it, put away your phones for a little while, put away your computer. I mean, if you're really looking for a story, you know, like, please, shut off your notifications. Just sit with it. Allow yourself the frustration of not understanding. Work with it. The beauty of his language is that it's transformative. It'll transform you if you let it. And even if it doesn't, at least give him the opportunity to try. All right? So please read Emerson. I'm also going to upload Thoreau. Please read that. We'll get to that as well, but this is where we want to spend most of our time next time. All right. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Adios.